रंगों दा त्योहार आया, होली दा रंग सजाया, ढोल वजदा भंगड़ा पाया, मस्ती विच झूम के छाया। फिर चल हो होली खेडने आइए, रंग दी बारिश हो, चांदनी हो जाइए। होला होली है, रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। मिट्टी रंग गुलाल दा साथ, साडी होली विच मस्ती दा राज, भंगदा पैग हो लगदा है आज। तेरी चल हो होली खेडने आइए, रंग दी बारिश हो, चांदनी हो जाइए। होला होली है, रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। पिछले साल जिले ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया, गुलाल से भर के आई झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है, रंगों से भर दे, होली है, रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। होली है, रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। पिछले साल जिले ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया, गुलाल से भर के आई झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है, रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम। रंगों दा त्योहार आया, होली दा रंग सजाया, ढोल वजदा भंगड़ा पाया, मस्ती विच झूम के छाया। फिर चल हो होली खेडने आइए, रंग दी बारिश हो, चांदनी हो जाइए। होला होली है, रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। मिट्टी रंग गुलाल दा साथ, साडी होली विच मस्ती दा राज, भंगदा पैग हो लगदा है आज। तेरी चल हो होली खेडने आइए, रंग दी बारिश हो, चांदनी हो जाइए। होला होली है, रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। पिछले साल जिले ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया, गुलाल से भर के आई झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है, रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। साल जिवे ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया, गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है, रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। होली है, रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। पिछले साल जिन्हें ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया। गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम। रंगों दा त्योहार आया, होली दा रंग सजाया, ढोल वजदा भंगड़ा पाया, मस्ती विच झूम के छाया। फिर चल हो होली खेड ले आइए, रंग दी बारिश हो चांदनी हो जाइए। होला होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली। मिट्टी रंग गुलाल दा साथ, साडी होली विच मस्ती दा राज, बंदा पैग हो लगदा है आज। तेरी चल हो होली खेडने आइए, रंग दी बारिश हो चांदनी हो जाइए। होला होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली। पिछले साल जिन्हें ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया। गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली। साल जिवे ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया। गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली। पिछले साल जिन्हें ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया। गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम। रंगों दा त्योहार आया, होली दा रंग सजाया, ढोल वजदा भंगड़ा पाया, मस्ती विच झूम के छाया। फिर चल हो होली खेड ले आइए, रंग दी बारिश हो चांदनी हो जाइए। होला होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली। मिट्टी रंग गुलाल दा साथ, साडी होली विच मस्ती दा राज, बंदा पैग हो लगदा है आज। तेरी चल हो होली खेडने आइए, रंग दी बारिश हो चांदनी हो जाइए। होला होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली। पिछले साल जिन्हें ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया। गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। पिछले साल जिवें ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया, गुलाल से पार के आई है, झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। पिछले साल जिन्हें ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया, गुलाल से भर के आई है, झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम। रंगों दा त्योहार आया, होली दा रंग सजाया, ढोल वजदा भंगड़ा पाया, मस्ती विच झूम के छाया, फिर चल हो होली खेड ले आइए, रंग दी बारिश हो, चांदनी हो जाइए होला। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। मिट्टी रंग गुलाल दा साथ, साडी होली विच मस्ती दा राज, बंद दा पैग हो लगदा है आज, तेरे चल हो होली खेडने आइए, रंग दी बारिश हो, चांदनी हो जाइए होला। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। पिछले साल जिन्हें ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया, गुलाल से भर के आई है, झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। साल जिवें ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया, गुलाल से भर के आई है, झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। पिछले साल जिन्हें ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया, गुलाल से भर के आई है, झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम। रंगों दा त्योहार आया, होली दा रंग सजाया, ढोल वजदा भंगड़ा पाया, मस्ती विच झूम के छाया, फिर चल हो होली खेड ले आइए, रंग दी बारिश हो, चांदनी हो जाइए होला। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। साल जिले ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया। गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। पिछले साल जिवे ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया। गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। पिछले साल जिले ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया। गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम। रंगों दा त्योहार आया, होली दा रंग सजाया, ढोल वजदा भंगड़ा पाया, मस्ती विच झूम के छाया। फिर चल हो होली खेड ले आइए, रंग दी बारिश हो, चांदनी हो जाइए होला। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। मिट्टी रंग गुलाल दा साथ, साडी होली विच मस्ती दा राज, रंग दा पैग हो लगदा है आज। तेरी चल हो होली खेड ले आइए, रंग दी बारिश हो, चांदनी हो जाइए होला। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। पिछले साल जिले ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया। गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। साल जिवे ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया। गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। पिछले साल जिले ना खेडे सी, इस साल रंग सज गया। गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम। रंगों दा त्योहार आया, होली दा रंग सजाया, ढोल ਵਜਦਾ ਭੰਗੜਾ ਪਾਇਆ ਮਸਤੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਝੂਮ ਕੇ ਛਾਇਆ ਫਿਰ ਚੱਲ ਹੋ ਹੋਲੀ ਖੇਡ ਲਿਆਈਏ ਰੰਗ ਦੀ ਬਾਰਿਸ਼ ਹੋ ਚਾਂਦਨੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਈਏ ਹੋਲਾ होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम के आजा पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली बल्ले बल्ले दिल से नाचे मिट्टी रंग गुलाल दा साथ साडी होली विच मस्ती दा राज बंद दा पैग हो लगदा है आज तेरी चल हो होली खेड ले आइए रंग दी बारिश हो चांदनी हो जाइए होला होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम के आजा पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली पिछले साल जिले ना खेडे सी इस साल रंग सज गया गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम के आजा पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली पिछले साल जिवे ना खेडे सी इस साल रंग सच गया गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम के आजा पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम के आजा पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली पिछले साल जिले ना खेडे सी इस साल रंग सज गया गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम
At Korea Legal, we're dealing with contracts daily. With Adobe Acrobat AI Assistant, you can get to the main points of a document faster and have the most relevant information extracted in minutes. All we have to do is ask.
Have you ever struggled with overflowing elements or weird resizing behavior in CSS and you just want to be able to create these awesome responsive layers? Well, then let me tell you, today I have something really special. I did some research to find out what is the best piece of information we can teach you in CSS change the way I approach coding in CSS. It will enable you to create beautiful and responsive layouts in any imaginable way. You're going to feel so much more confident when approaching typical CSS problems. How to center a div, or how can I make my website responsive with just a few lines of code. It all starts with HTML, where you have to define a reference. This could be the body, or a specific container that you use for your layout. Every HTML element that holds any type of content can be a text box or grid content. Our first goal is finding out how to align elements anywhere inside the parent bottom, left, right, center, and every combination in between. So we are going to answer the most popular beginner question, how to center a div. In HTML, we have these 5 div container boxes. They have some very basic styles in CSS. To align your boxes with a flex box layout, you need to address the parent element. So we address the body and the type, display, box. Notice how this immediately changed the way the boxes are positioned. They used to be one below the other, and now they are side by side. The display property is a very important CSS property. Most elements have a display of block or inline per default. Block elements take up the entire width of the screen. This results in elements being forced to the next line. When we apply display flags, we leave the system behind and enter a new world. Here, things work differently. Let's add a little border so that we can see the frame of our flexbox layout. The most important concept of flexbox are the axes along which items are positioned, the main axis and the cross axis. They control the flow of our flexbox layout. To position your elements, you have to keep both of these axes in mind. Don't worry, I will keep showing them every once in a while. To position your elements anywhere along the main axis, you need the Justify Content property. This property has three basic values. Flex start is at the start of the main axis. This is the default value, which is why our boxes are here at the left side of our screen. Flex end is at the end of the main axis. This will align the boxes on the right side. And center is at the center of the main axis. So you can use these two lines of code, display flex and justify content center, to center your elements horizontally. By the way, this video is a free sample of our HTML and CSS complete course, so if you like the way we teach and you want to learn more about web development, then get the full course right now. Now let's see how we can align elements vertically. In this case, we need to consider the cross axis. To do this, let's increase the size of the Flexbox layout by applying a min height of 800 pixels in the bottom. Now we can see that this black border is basically the frame of our Flexbox layout. To center your elements on the cross axis, we use the Align Items property. This property can have the same values as Justify Content. So you have Flex Start for top positioning, meaning at the start of the cross axis, Flex End for bottom positioning, now they are down here, and of course center to put them in the center. And now we have finally answered how to center a grid. You just need these three lines of code to center elements along the main and cross axis. Since Flexbox is flexible, this layout will work even if you change the size of the layout. The boxes will always be in the center, no matter if you change the height and width of the body. But Justify Content and Align Items can have three additional and more complex: space between, space around, and space even. Space between will distribute the element from left to right. The first and last element will touch the edge of the layout. Depending on how big the container is, the elements will have a bigger gap in between. Space around works similarly, but here the first and last element do not touch the edge. Instead, every element gets some space to the left and right. As you can see, even when I resize the entire website, the spacing between the elements adjusts automatically. But here we run into a slight inconsistency that just triggers my process. Since the right space of the box adds up with the left space of the second box, it will result in these spaces being twice as big as the spaces that we have to the edges. If you don't want that, you can use space evenly. Here, all the spaces are the same size. And now finally the gaps are perfectly balanced, as all things should be. And of course, all of these values are completely flexible. They adjust perfectly when the size of the container changes. And that's the whole point of using Flexbox. Theoretically, you could achieve the same thing, centering a div and positioning your elements using only margins and padding. But they are just not as flexible as a Flexbox layout. By the way, you can use the same values on the Align Items property as well. But in this case, it wouldn't make sense, since we only have one row of content. The boxes will always be at the start of the cross axis. But it is possible to use these values on the cross axis, as we'll learn later once the layouts get more complex. For now, let's learn about another interesting Flexbox property, which is Flex Direction. To understand it easier, let's remove Align Items and just use Justify Content Flex Start for now. The Flex Direction property controls the direction of the main axis. Its default value is row, which makes the main axis go from left to right. You could also use row reverse to make it go from right to left. Looking at the numbers, we can see that it starts counting from the right. But this property also changed the way our Justify Content value works. Now, as the main axis goes from right to left, the value Flex Start is on the right side, and Flex End is on the left side. You can also make the main axis go from top to bottom by applying Flex Direction column. Now the elements are no longer side by side, but instead on top of each other. Since the direction of the main axis changed, the direction of the cross axis changed as well. Now if you want to center these boxes horizontally, you no longer use Justify Content, but instead Align Items. Since Justify Content aligns the elements on the main axis, which goes from top to bottom, it doesn't make sense now to use it. We need to use Align Items Center to center them on the cross axis. So I hope you understand that it is really important to remember the flex direction of your layout, as this completely changes the way all the other properties work. Per default, Flexbox uses a flex direction row. This will align the elements side by side. But you're also going to want to change it to flex direction column when you want your elements to be aligned vertically. Here is a very common use case scenario. You want your entire website to stay the same. Everything is aligned vertically, but you also want to center everything horizontally. Then you would go to the body and apply display flex, flex direction, column, and align items center. And with that, every element will automatically be centered horizontally. Alright, let's get back to our starting point, display flex. There are a few more simple flexbox properties before it gets complicated. The gap property will create a gap between all items. This property is very simple and you no longer need to use margins inside a flexbox layout. For example, let's give all boxes a gap of 20 pixels. And as we can see, now every box has a nice little gap in between. The flex grab property can make your flexbox layout responsive using only one line of code.
That client review was brutal.
We're gonna be underwater for weeks.
I'm already so pruny.
This is fixable. Just use Grammarly. We'll crush it.
I'm already crushed. I cannot be crushed any further.
Sit up too soon.
Okay, first use Grammarly's AI to sound confident so the team doesn't think you're drunk. Now let's get to that. Grammarly can look through the proposal to find what's missing. Wow. Like in the intro, you need to show the clients what's at stake.
That took me 2 days to write. I had to go like 18 things from apps to focus on.
Well, now it takes one to get. And look, Grammarly knows the audience is non-technical, so it can take out the jargon, and make benefits easier to understand.
Wow. I think our clients are gonna love this.
I'm gonna resubmit it. And with Grammarly working across 500,000 apps and websites, we'll never be underwater again!
It's approved. Tell me. But, hey, I think 8 exclamation marks might be overdoing it.
Well, I appreciate that, Grammarly, but this is an 8 exclamation situation.
Yeah, totes. Download Grammarly for free.
You either have wrap or no wrap. If you use Let's Wrap, you will get a responsive layout that will align your items to the next line if we don't have enough space. Resizing the window will show how the elements flow to the next line when necessary. If you use Let's Wrap, No Wrap, that will not happen, and instead the boxes will shrink together. Using a flex wrap of wrap will make the elements flow to the next line. If we want this layout to be centered using Justify Content Center and Align Item Center, we end up with this layout. Why the gap between the first line and the second line is so big will become clear once we have a few more boxes. So let's say we have 9 boxes in HTML. Just add a few boxes and number them properly. Then the flexbox layout will have more line breaks when we use flex wrap. The issue that we are running into is that we no longer have one main axis and one cross axis, but every line has its own main and cross axis. In this case, we have 3 of them. The Align Items property will only control the alignment along each individual cross axis. Flex Start puts the boxes at the start of each cross axis. Flex End at the end, and Center in the center. But now we also need another CSS property to control the alignment of all the lines together. For that, we use Align Content. Align Content is a default value of space plus, and this is why the gaps between the lines are so big. We can also apply space between or space evenly to change that. And of course, we can also use the basic values Flex Start, Flex End, and Center. So the difference between Align Content and Align Items is Align Items will control the alignment along the cross-axis of every flexbox line individually, and Align Content will control the alignment of all lines together. Ultimately, the perfectly centered layout in Flexbox is when you center all 3 of these properties and wrap the elements automatically when necessary. Justify Content Center, Align Item Center, and Align Content Center. By the way, when we have a layout like this, where there are horizontal gaps and vertical gaps, then you can actually split the gap property into 2 different properties, row gap and column gap. You can use these to apply different values for the horizontal and vertical gaps. Let's say column gap is 10 pixels and row gap is 20 pixels. This way we applied different values for the horizontal and vertical gaps. But most likely you will not need that, and just use the normal gap property to control both at the same time. These properties are not so important on Flexbox, but they will become interesting when you have more complex layouts in grid later in the course. By now, you should have a good understanding of alignment and Flexbox. Using these Flexbox properties and their different combinations of values, you can create any alignment possibility you want. And of course, if you don't know by now, you can also use Flexbox in every other HTML element as well. It does not have to be the body. For example, little thinking exercise for beginners. If you want to center the numbers inside the box, which are currently at the top left corner, how would you do that? How can you center the numbers inside the boxes? Pause the video and try it out yourself. The answer is pretty straightforward. We do the same thing as earlier, but now inside the box selector. Display flex to enable flex. Justify content center for the main axis and align item center for the cross axis. And this way we centered the numbers inside the boxes. Obviously, you can use all the different combinations we talked about with flex start and fixed ends here as well. Now let's move on to something very powerful in Flexbox. You don't always have to wrap elements in Flexbox. You can also resize them responsibly. So, our next goal is this layout where the boxes grow and shrink responsibly. To do that, let's go back to our layout of 5 boxes in HTML. So, remove a few boxes so that we have 5 boxes again. In CSS, we remove any Flexbox properties except display flex and gap of end pixels. This is as simple as it gets. Now, since we have no flex wrap applied, the boxes will be resized automatically if the viewport gets too small. This behavior can be specified using flex shrink. And interestingly, this is something that you apply on the flex icons, not on the flex container. Inside the boxes, we can apply a flex shrink of 0, for example. This will prevent the shrinking of the boxes. They can no longer be resized and will overflow the container. This is also the case for every non-Flexbox layout. When you have the problem of overflowing elements like this, then consider using Flexbox to either wrap the elements to the next line or enable flex shrink with a value of 1 to make them shrink automatically. But remember, flex shrink of 1 is the default value. You can imagine this property like a switch that you can turn on and off. Now, when we have flex shrink applied, you can see how the boxes resize automatically. Currently, we are addressing every box the same way, using their plus. So every box has the same flex shrink value, but you can also use different flex shrink values on each icon. So in HTML, I give the first box an ID, box 1. I want to style this one differently. When I address this box in CSS, I could give this box a flex shrink of 0, for example. And the other ones still have a flex shrink of 1. This will result in this behavior. Every element shrinks when necessary, except the first one. It will stay the same. You could use this intentionally if you don't want specific elements to shrink. For example, if you don't want to distort an image icon, then it is pretty useful to disable flex shrink on that element. Now flex shrink is pretty useful, but actually what I use way more often is its counterpart.
Managing your clients and sales is easy when you're just starting out. But as your business grows and so does your team, it might get challenging. You start losing clients and it gets increasingly...
Flex grow. Flex grow enables elements to grow, meaning to stretch along the main axis. Default value is 0, so elements do not grow per default. But once you enable it, flex grow 1, all the flex items try to fill out the empty space inside their parent element. This means if there's more empty space, the elements will be bigger. They grow. Flex grow tries to fill out all the available space inside the parent element. And of course, you can address specific elements and apply a different grow behavior. Let's say for the boxes, the flex grow is 0, so they cannot grow, but box number 1 can grow. And as you can see, we end up with this effect where only the first element will grow. I used this exact behavior when I developed the to-do application. Here, the to-do text grows as much as possible, while the checkbox, the delete button and all the other elements should not be able to grow. This is a very useful technique to resize specific elements depending on the screen size, so you will use it very often when making a website responsive. Flex grow and flex shrink are not only a boolean that you can turn on and off, but they also work as a multiplier. You can assign even higher numbers than 1. They only make sense if they are compared with each other. For example, let's give the boxes a flex grow of 1 and the first box a flex grow of 5. Now, every element has the ability to grow, but the first one does it 5 times faster. This element will be bigger than the others, but every element can potentially grow. So you can basically apply different grow values to control how much of the empty space they should fill. This does not mean that this box is 5 times bigger. As we can see, per default, they are all the same size. But only when there's new empty space to fill out. Then this element will reserve 5 times more of that new space than the other elements. And the same thing can be done for flex shrink. Now, the first box shrinks 5 times faster than the others. And of course, you can address every element on its own and apply a different value for flex grow and flex shrink. But I never had a situation where this specific feature was being used. Since most times you just want to turn on and off the grow and shrink ability for the elements in a balanced way, where they all behave the same way. This whole system of flex grow and flex shrink becomes even more powerful when you combine it with minimum and maximum sizes, such as min width and max width. Because then you can define where the flex shrink and flex grow should stop. You can say my boxes should be able to grow, flex grow of 1, but they should not become bigger than 300 pixels each. Max width 300 pixels. Now the elements grow up to the point where they reach the maximum size. And the same for flex shrink. They can shrink, but only until they reach a minimum width of, let's say, 100 pixels. This will make them shrink in the browser as expected, but once they reach that size of 100 pixels, the elements will overflow. And of course, overflowing elements is something that you should avoid. But sometimes your elements should not get any smaller and need a minimum width. To solve the overflowing problem, remember that earlier we talked about flex wrap. We can combine flex shrink and flex wrap by just using a media query. Normally we use flex shrink and flex wrap is disabled with no wrap. But once the screen size gets too small and the min width causes the element to overflow, then we apply a flex wrap of wrap, and the element wraps to the next plus. And this is a beautiful example of how easy it can be to make your website responsive. You just use flex shrink, and once you don't want it to shrink anymore, then you use a flex wrap. A special feature of Flexbox that I don't really see that often being used is the aligned self property. This property works just as aligned items, but you use it on the flexed items. That means, let's say we have an aligned items of flexed stuff. And for some reason, we want to isolate the first box and apply something else that is not flexed stuff. Align self of flex end, for example. This will position only the first box as flex end, and everything else stays flexed up. Of course, center is also possible. So you can use this property to align self one item differently on the cross axis. But unfortunately, I have not found a similar flexbox property for the main axis. Let's say we have a general justified content of flex end, and we want the first item to be flexed up. It's only logical to assume that the property justify self works the same for the main axis. But unfortunately it doesn't, since justify self is actually a property that you use in CSS Grid, as you are going to learn later in the course. If you want to achieve the desired layout, where only the first element is on the left side and every other element is on the right, then you will use the old distribution of margin right auto. This is a very useful technique for navigation bars. Here you want your company logo on the left side and everything else on the right side. So just use margin right auto. Now we already know a lot about CSS Flexbox layouts. But before we dive into grid layouts, let's summarize the key takeaways of Flexbox. You can position everything anywhere inside a flex container if you consider the main and cross axes, and their properties justify content and align items. You can wrap elements to the next line using flex wrap of wrap. You can also resize elements using flex grow and flex shrink and apply different values for each element if that is what you want. Combining all of that with minimum and maximum sizes and media queries, you can already achieve most layouts that you have in mind. But if you want to create more complex layouts, or you just want to simplify your code, then let me introduce CSS Grid, because there are actually things that are easier in Grid and work with even fewer lines of code. Here is a common situation: how to separate it. An experienced Flexbox guy would say, just use this word flex, justify content center, and align item center. And that's fine. But a grid layouts guy would say, Hold on, 3 lines of code? I can do it in 3. Display grid, place content, center. Now if you want to learn CSS grid in Flexbox in a practical way by building advanced projects like this landing page that uses modern Flexbox and grid sections, then I strongly recommend that you get our HTML and CSS complete course using the first link in the video description. My name is Fabian and this was Coding to Go, the channel where you learn the most relevant coding concepts in just a few minutes.
42 lakhs per annum.
Wow, 42 lakhs, that's your salary?
Yes.
And what do you do?
I'm an AI tool for start music.
Animations are a great way to make your brand stand out. They can seem a bit scary and difficult for beginners, but they are actually quite easy to understand if you know the right CSS properties to use. Sometimes when you only need to animate the change from one stage to another, like change for the user. The animation property applies an animation between at least 2 styles. It is a shorthand for all of these properties that you see here. The first thing to ask yourself is, do I even need the animation property to achieve my goal? Sometimes when you only need to animate the change from one stage to another, like changing on hover, then a simple transition will suffice. It doesn't matter how many properties you need to change if the change involves only one step. First this, then that. Then you use the transition property. But if your change contains more than one step, but rather a sequence of multiple steps, then you need an animation. Also when you have an ongoing occurring change, something that is constantly being animated in the background, then you would also use an animation. Before you can assign an animation to an element, you first need to create it using the add keyframes rule. Then you give your animation a name, like spin for example. It's completely up to you how you call it. Inside this keyframes rule, we need to define our animation sequence. Each step during the animation is a certain percentage value. 0% is the beginning of the animation, and 100% the end. Every value in between is going to be some time during the animation. We want to spin this element and turn it into a circle. So at 100%, meaning at the end, the element should be rotated and grounded. So we use transform rotate to rotate the element by 360 degrees. We also changed the border radius to 50% to turn it into a perfect circle. Now we need to assign this keyframes animation to our element, using the animation name property. Animation name, spin. And we also need to define how long our animation should be, using animation duration. Let's say it's 3 seconds long. Now, when we save and refresh, our animation will play one time, and then jump right back into its initial state. Let's make it more complex. Let's say that at 50%, meaning in the middle of the animation, we want to increase the size of the element, using scale 2. This will make the element grow and rotate simultaneously. Also, it doesn't keep the scale of 2. It shrinks back to its initial size. To maintain the size until the very end, we need to add scale 2 to the end of the animation as well. So when you're changing properties during the animation, you need to apply that state during every step in the animation to keep the change until the end. If you don't do that, then the keyframes will only apply for that one step in the sequence. I also want to wait with the rotating. First, the element should grow and then rotate. Currently, it happens at the same time. For that, at 50% of the animation, I need to use transform rotate 0. Also, border radius 0. Now it grows first and then it spins. So I hope you understand that you need to be very specific of when to animate what CSS property. If it's not specified, it will just assume the rest of the sequence and blend perfectly from one step to the next. By now we know how to define the animation sequence using keyframes and the duration. You can use every CSS property to basically create any type of animation. You just need to be creative. But that's not all. Let's look at a few properties to fine-tune our animation. The first one was animation duration. This defines how long the animation should take. So if I set this to 0.5 seconds, then it will play very fast. 3 seconds is a bit slow. The next property is the animation timing function. Its initial value is ease. This will make it slow down at every animation step to make it smoother. We could also set this to
मेरे 24 साल के टेक्नोलॉजी एक्सपीरियंस ने मुझे सिखाया है कि दुनिया में 80% लोग गलत प्रोफेशन में अपने पोटेंशियल को बर्बाद करते हैं। आपने कभी सोचा कि कुछ लोग सेम मेहनत करते हुए भी एक्स्ट्रा ऑर्डिनरी सक्सेस अचीव कर लेते हैं और कुछ लाइफ टाइम स्ट्रगल करते हैं।
linear to make it play at a consistent speed. There's also ease in, ease out, and ease in out. If you are into video editing, you probably already know the exact difference this makes. Simply explained, it determines the speed curve of the animation. when it should run faster and when slower. Using linear will make it play with a consistent speed, and using any kind of easing will make the animation smoother by slowing down on every step in the animation sequence. The next property is the animation delay. Here you can define how long the animation should wait before playing. If I set this to 1 second, then it will simply wait 1 second. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a website with a sidebar navigation menu that uses modern icons, drop-down menus, smooth transitions, and a responsive CSS grid layout. This project is the perfect learning opportunity to learn more about grid, flexbox, positions, transitions, overflow behavior, and responsive web design in general. Because on smartphone screens, we will turn everything into a bottom navigation bar. Here we will face some extra hot challenges. We're going to do all of that towards the end of the video, so stick around to learn how to make all of this responsive. My name is Fabian and this is Coding to Go, the channel where you learn the most relevant coding concepts in just a few minutes. As always, we start with our HTML code. Create a new file, index.html, and create some boilerplate code. The title of this tab is Holi. Now we have to define the elements that make up our layout. Step 1. Make sure your HTML code consists of 2 semantic elements, the nav and the main tag. The main tag will hold everything that you put on your website. So just add some example content for now. I created a few div containers, added some h2 headings, and generated some lorem ipsum text. The nav tag will receive an ID, sidebar. One could argue that using the aside tag would be more fitting for a sidebar, but since our sidebar serves as the main navigation of this website, the nav tag will be a better choice. If, however, you have both a horizontal navbar and a sidebar, then you would use the aside tag for the sidebar. Now here we want to have an unordered list, where each list item will be an anchor tag. Use the href attribute to specify the domain that we want to link to. We have index.html for our current website, which is why I also add the class active. This is important because you can use this active class later to highlight the current website in the sidebar, so that the users always know where they are. But we're going to do that later. Let's quickly reference the other pages as well. We have dashboard.html, calendar.html, and profile.html. Each link is its own list item. These links will all have 2 child elements, an icon and a span. The span will just be the normal text content, like home, dashboard, calendar, and profile. The icons will be added above each span using an SVG tag. You can get SVG icons completely for free at fonts.google.com/icons. Simply search for the icon you want and download as SVG. I will get all of these icons that you see here, and this is really what makes the design work so well. These modern icons can make all the difference and give your website a more modern look. They're also going to be very important in the collapsed version of the sidebar, since this is the only thing that the user will see. Once we have the icons in our project folder, open them in VS Code to get the SVG element that is stored inside. Copy the entire SVG element and paste it into the link directly above the span element. This is the SVG code for the home icon. Now repeat this process for the dashboard, calendar, and profile. Simply copy the entire SVG element for the respective icon and paste it inside the link. Make sure to use the fitting icon for each navigation element. Of course, if your website has different pages and links, then you would use different icons for it. If Google Fonts does not have the right icons for you, then you might also check out simpleicons.org. There you can find the SVG icons for every company logo, in case you need that. Once we got every link with an icon and a span, we can continue with the drop-down menus. You see, right now, I only took care of the links that don't have a drop-down menu: home, dashboard, calendar, and profile. But the Create button and the To-Do List buttons will have a sub-menu so that we can click on more options. So let's create another LI element, and instead of a link, we create a button. It has the class drop-down button. This one will contain a span, create, and choose a fitting SVG icon. Also, after the span, we add another icon, which indicates that this is a drop-down. Now, directly below the button, still within the same list item, we create an unordered list. This is our submenu, which contains list items with anchor tags. And these anchor tags are the actual links of our drop-down menu. Let's call them folder, document, and project. Also, these could be buttons or anything else. We just have to make sure to style them properly in CSS. I'm just going to leave a placeholder for now. Now this is the HTML code for one drop-down menu. We have a button and a UL. We're going to make the button look exactly like a normal LI element. And trust me, creating the CSS code for the drop-down was a lot of fun. I had to try out so many different ways to make the transition work properly. since transitioning to hide auto in CSS is quite a challenge. I'm really excited to show you the solution I found, but we're going to do this later. For now, let's focus on the HTML code again. I'm going to copy the entire list item to create another drop-down menu. This one is called To-Do Lists. I replace the SVG icon and change the content of our submenu. This time we have 5 list items. These could be example to-do lists that the user already created. You would probably generate them dynamically in your front-end framework. And now the HTML code is almost complete. We just need one more thing. At the beginning of our URL, we add another list item for our logo. This would be your company name. I'm just going to put coding to go. We also add a button that has the ID toggle button. This will be the button that opens and closes the sidebar. So let's add the fitting icon, which is the double left arrow. You could also use the menu icon if you prefer. Alright, and that's it. Let's get to the interesting part, the CSS code. We want to turn this ugly looking HTML page into a responsive animated website, where the sidebar is on the left side and the main content is on the right side. Make sure to embed the CSS file properly and create the file in our project folder, style.css. The first thing I always do is to import the font family Fontens. This is totally optional, but I just love that font. Then we address the root element to define our color palette using CSS variables. Then I apply some very basic styles for the website. This will give us a clean starting point that we can work with. We have no annoying predefined margins and paddings, a nice font family and line height, and the body height is set up properly for both desktop and device-specific requirements. Nothing too complicated. The next step is going to be very important. Apply display grid so that we can define the grid layout for this website. Our grid layout should have 2 columns, so we use grid template columns. The first column should have an automatic size, so just write auto. And the second column is meant for the rest of the website. It's just one fraction. One fraction will make all of this responsive. This means the sidebar will only be as big as it needs to be. It's scaled automatically. Whereas the main content of the website will have a responsive size of one fraction, which will allow it to grow and shrink depending on how much space the device offers. Before we get to the sidebar, let's apply some basic styles to the main content of the website. I'm going to style the containers and their content to make things look a little better. This is also very optional. Now let's finally take care of the sidebar. Box sizing border box and height of 100 viewport height to make it stretch the entire height. The width is 250 pixels and we apply a bit of padding. 5 pixels top and bottom and 1 EM left and right. The background color should be our variable base color. And we have a border right of 1 pixel solid line color. Let's quickly select the sidebar's UL to apply list style none. This will remove the bullet points. The first list item in our unordered list uses a flexbox layout with flex end to have it oriented on the right side. We have a margin bottom and the logo will be styled with a bolder font weight, let's say 600. We also want to style the active list item. Remember, this is the class we apply to the LI, which holds the current website link. Depending on where we are on the website, a different link will be highlighted using this class. Here I want to style the anchor tag. Let's change the text color and the color of the SVGs. Both of these will be colored using the accent color variable. On the website, the home link should now be highlighted, because this is our current website link. The next styles are meant for quite a few elements. The sidebar anchor tags, the sidebar drop-down button, and the logo. They all share the same styles because we want to have a consistent CSS layout. So we can style them in one single CSS rule by just writing commas between the selectors. They all have a border radius and padding. Text decoration none. Color is our text color variable. And it uses display flags and align items center to center the content vertically. We have a gap of 1 EM to control the distance between the icons and the text. Since the drop-down button is not an anchor tag, we need a few additional styles so that they all look the same. Now, one important aspect I want to take care of next is the scroll behavior. You see, when we have a lot of content on the website, which is why I put all of this content here, then we can usually scroll down. In this case, I want the sidebar to stay in place. Only the main content should be scrollable. Many people would use position fix in this case, since this allows us to fixate the position of the sidebar. But using fixed positioning will put the sidebar onto another stacking context, which means that it will be isolated from the others. And this kind of breaks the grid layout. The element won't get recognized in the body, which is why the value of auto for the first column will be 0 pixels font. only the main content will stretch the entire grid. So instead of position fixed, we can use position sticky. We also need a top of 0 and a line self start. This will set up the sticking point of the sidebar, which is the top edge of our viewport. In this way, our space of 250 pixels will be reserved in the grid, and when we scroll the element, it will follow us perfectly. Let's quickly select all the SVGs inside the sidebar. Here we want to apply a flex range of 0. This will prevent any distortion in size. And we use the fill property to apply the text fill. Now let's style the spans. We have spans inside the anchor text and spans inside the drop-down buttons. We always have to style these together. Here we want to apply a flex grow of 1. Remember, the spans hold the actual text of the links and drop-down buttons. By applying flex grow of 1, we can make sure that they fill out their parent element. This will push the other elements to the edges, like the drop-down SVG for example. Now this icon will always be on the right side. If we don't have flex grow applied, then this icon will just be wherever the text ends. And this will be different every time depending on how long the word is. So, to have this consistent, make sure the text has a flex grow of 1. Let's also apply a hover effect to our links and drop-down buttons. Here I want to change the background color and apply the hover color variable. The next thing I want to show you is one of the coolest things I've learned recently. The opening mechanism of how to open and close the sidebar with a CSS transition. Don't get me wrong, I did know how to do this earlier, but not with a transition. You see, when we want to open and close a drop-down, then we can do this with display none or changing the height from height 0 to height auto. But in all of these cases, we cannot put a transition on it, because these are the things that don't work in CSS. But there is a way of how we can do this with a grid layout, because on grid layouts, transitions do work. The first thing I tried was to use display none, because this would be the simplest way to do this. So we select the sidebar submenu and apply display none. Now the submenu is gone. Pretty simple. Then we style the sidebar submenu that has the class show. Here we apply display block, just like that. We're going to add and remove this class using JavaScript. But for now, we can just try out what happens if I add the class manually to the element. So, in the browser, we inspect the page and find one of the drop-down menus. Here, I simply apply the class show on the UL. We can see, adding and removing this class will open and close the drop-down menu. But that is not working the way I want it. There is no transition, it simply jumps open. And even if I go to the CSS code and apply a transition of 300 milliseconds ease and out, then it will have no effect. As we can see, transitioning from display none is not possible. Another option would be to try using overflowing and height to open and close the menu. Instead of display none, we apply overflow hidden, and then use height 0 pixels. This will hide the submenu too, because it has no height. And now when the show class is applied, we want to set the height back to auto. The value auto will make it assume the height it needs to display its content properly. So sometimes we have 5 list items in the submenu and sometimes only 3. Height auto will adjust automatically. But as we can see, the transition is still not kicking in, because this is the next problem I faced. We cannot animate to height auto. But just to show you this, if the value was anything other than auto, then the transition will work. So if I just hardcode 300 pixels instead of auto, and then try the same thing, now the transition is working perfectly. We can see opening and closing will be animated in the browser. So in theory, this would be possible if we just know the value that we need. 300 pixels is not a good choice, because what happens if we have 10 list items or only 2? The value should be different every time. In other words, it should be automatic to handle a varying amount of child elements. But as I already told you, height auto doesn't work, so this option doesn't work either. So instead, let's apply the last thing I tried, which actually worked. We're going to use CSS grid. Remove the stats we tried, but keep the transition property. Instead, we apply display grid. Our grid should handle only one child element. So let's go to the HTML code and create a div container around the list items in the submenu. So we create a div and put the list.
रंगों से पर्दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम के आजा पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली होली है रंगों से पर्दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम के पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली पिछले साल जिन्हें ना खेडे सी इस साल रंग सज गया गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम रंगों दा त्योहार आया होली दा रंग सजाया ढोल बजदा भंगड़ा पाया मस्ती विच झूम के छाया फिर चल हो होली खेड ले आइए रंग दी बारिश हो चांदनी हो जाइए होला होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम के आजा पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली मिट्टी रंग गुलाल दा साथ साडी होली विच मस्ती दा राज बंद दा पैग हो लगदा है आज तेरी चल हो होली खेडने आइए रंग दी बारिश हो चांदनी हो जाइए होला होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम के आजा पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली पिछले साल जिन्हें ना खेडे सी इस साल रंग सज गया गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम के आजा पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली साल जिवे ना खेडे सी इस साल रंग सज गया गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम के आजा पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम के आजा पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली पिछले साल जिन्हें ना खेडे सी इस साल रंग सज गया गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम रंगों दा त्योहार आया होली दा रंग सजाया ढोल बजदा भंगड़ा पाया मस्ती विच झूम के छाया फिर चल हो होली खेड ले आइए रंग दी बारिश हो चांदनी हो जाइए होला होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम के आजा पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली मिट्टी रंग गुलाल दा साथ साडी होली विच मस्ती दा राज बंद दा पैग हो लगदा है आज तेरी चल हो होली खेडने आइए रंग दी बारिश हो चांदनी हो जाइए होला होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी मस्ती से झूम के आजा पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले होली पिछले साल जिन्हें ना खेडे सी इस साल रंग सज गया गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है रंगों से भर दे जिंदगी, मस्ती से झूम के आजा, पंजाबी स्टाइल विच खेड ले ये होली। पिछले साल जिवे ना खेदे सी, इस साल रंग सच गया, गुलाल से भर के आई है झूमे सब नाच के साथ ये होली। होली है